For the longest time, space exploration felt like a two-horse race, right? It was the US versus the Soviet Union, this epic battle for the stars. But while all eyes were on them, a totally different kind of player was quietly getting in the game, and they were going to change all the rules. So let's get into the incredible, and I mean incredible, story of the Indian space program. And we have to start with this picture. Honestly, this image tells you almost everything. While NASA was building these giant, sprawling launch complexes, India's scientists, well, they were using bicycles and ox carts to move rocket parts. This story isn't about giant budgets and unlimited resources. It's a story about pure, unadulterated, brilliant resourcefulness. The way the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, got started? Well, it's a story of makeshift solutions and just raw determination. It almost sounds like a legend. So get this. It all started in a small, rural village. Why there? Well, it was the perfect spot, scientifically speaking, right near the magnetic equator. But the only building big enough to be their base of operations was a church. So they literally had to get the pastor's permission to turn his church into a command center. And from there, from that church, they launched their very first rocket in 1963. Right from the start, this was never about prestige. It was about practical goals for the nation. Now, here's where it gets really wild. This was the height of the Cold War, and somehow ISRO managed to get technology from these bitter rivals. They were getting rockets from NASA, payloads from France, computers from the Soviet Union. It was this amazing international jigsaw puzzle. They even had engineers machining parts by hand because, well, the American parts were in imperial units and the French ones were metric. They were truly building something bigger than the sum of its parts. And this is so important. It wasn't just about launching rockets for the sake of it. Israel's work immediately started impacting people's lives. In 1975, they teamed up with NASA for something called SITE. They used a NASA satellite to beam educational TV shows about farming and health directly into 2,400 rural villages, many of which didn't even have electricity. This was way more than a tech demo. It created huge public support for the space program. Okay, so with the whole country behind them, it was time for the next big step, building their very own reliable homegrown rocket. And let me tell you, that meant a very steep learning curve, full of trial, error, and some pretty spectacular failures. So first you had the SLV, their first shot at an orbital rocket. It had some wins, but it was really inconsistent. Then came the ASLV, which was supposed to be an upgrade, but it ran into major problems. Now, it would have been so easy to just give up. But these failures weren't seen as the end of the road. No, they were seen as essential lessons that paved the way for their masterpiece. And this slide, this says it all. After all that struggle with the early rockets, just look at that jump in reliability with their next rocket, the PSLV. A 95% success rate. That kind of leap doesn't just happen. It was built piece by piece from the tough lessons they learned from all those early failures. The PSLV is just the perfect example of ISRO's whole philosophy, what they call frugal engineering. For example, when US sanctions cut off their solid fuel supply, did they stop? Nope. They just invented their own, called HTPB, which actually turned out to be better and easier to handle. And to get a modern liquid engine, they made a deal with France, where no money changed hands at all. They just traded engineering hours for the license to build the French VCOS engine. It's just genius-level problem solving. So now they have this incredibly reliable workhorse, the PSLV. And with that, ISRO was ready to look beyond Earth's orbit. It was time to take that same frugal mindset and aim for whole other worlds. And on their very first mission to the moon, Chandrayaan-1, they didn't just get there. They made a massive discovery. They found direct, conclusive evidence of water molecules at the moon's south pole. This one finding literally kicked off a brand new global space race to that exact spot. Okay, so after the moon, they felt confident. Next up, Mars. So how much do you think it cost them to send a spacecraft to another planet? Just take a look at that number. $74 million. And to really put that into perspective, it cost Hollywood more money to make the movie The Martian than it cost India to actually send a real spacecraft to Mars. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. It's probably the single best example of their whole philosophy. So how on earth did they do it for so cheap? Well, their big, powerful rocket wasn't ready yet, so they fell back on their old reliable, the PSLV. But it wasn't strong enough to fly straight to Mars. So they came up with this brilliant workaround. They orbited the Earth for weeks, doing a series of engine burns to slowly gain speed before finally slingshotting the probe towards Mars on a 298-day journey. An absolute masterclass in orbital mechanics. But to reach for their next big goals, they needed way more power. That led to the LVM-3, their first real heavy-lift rocket. And just look at that jump in how much it can carry. The biggest challenge here was developing their own cryogenic engine. That's super complex tech that they had to figure out on their own after a deal to buy them fell apart.
And this new, powerful rocket let them try for their boldest mission yet, actually landing on the moon. In 2019, Chandrayaan-2 got heartbreakingly close, but a software bug caused the lander to crash. But in classic Isro style, they didn't call it a failure, they called it a lesson. They went back, fixed the design, and in 2023, Chandrayaan-3 nailed a perfect soft landing, making India the first country in history to ever reach the lunar South Pole.
This whole journey, right, from a village church all the way to the moon, it just shows this amazing pattern of learning, adapting, and doing incredible things with what you have. So what could possibly be next? Well, their ambition isn't slowing down one bit. They're deep into developing their own program to send humans to space, with the first launch aiming for 2026. And the long-term goal? A permanently crewed Indian space station. The journey is really just getting started. When you step back, you realize this isn't just a story about rockets. It's about education, it's about making the most of what you've got, and it's about chasing something huge. It kind of leaves you wondering, after a journey like that, what does impossible even mean anymore?